It's your host, Miles Kilpatrick. I'm a second-year broadcast journalism student at Georgia State University.
Hi, guys. It's your co-host, Anaya Riddick. I'm a first-year sociology and comparative women's studies major at Spelman College.
Today, we are here with Mark Torfey, an expert in the field of mental health, as he is a marriage and family therapist, along with Nick Farthing, the program manager at Silence to Shame. And here is an opportunity for them to introduce themselves. So first, we have Mark.
Hi, I'm Mark Torfey. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist here in Georgia. I have been doing this for about 5 years now, graduated from Mercer.
Thank you for that, Mark. Next, we'll have Nick introduce yourself.
Hey, everybody. My name is Nick Farthing. I've been in the mental health space now with Silence to Shame for 2 years. Before that, I worked in education and also I have a background in school counseling. Been in Georgia now for around 5-6 years, but I'm originally from LA and I'm happy to be here today.
Thank you for that, Nick. And thank you to our audience for tuning in to today's episode titled Let's Unpack Black Men's Mental Health, where we will be taking a deep dive into the journey that is the mental health of Black men.
As I'm here today with fellow Black men who I'm sure have had their own journey maintaining good mental health, there are some topics I would like to discuss to better understand how good mental health looks in the Black community. So the first question I would like to ask you guys is, what made you want to get into the mental health space in the first place?
For me, it was my own journey. It was I had been married, had children, and just got to a point in my life where, based on the visual, looks like I live a great life. But I just was not happy, and I could not figure out why. Could not figure out what was missing, could not figure out what direction to go, and just was stuck. And so I started my own mental health journey probably about 15 years ago, maybe a little bit after that. And just my journey was so good, and my therapist was so good in helping me really figure out kind of what was going on with me, figuring out old issues that didn't recognize that I had, things that were holding me back. And so getting through that, I just felt like what she did for me, and I've always told her this, I felt like she saved my life, not in a I'm going to do anything to myself type of way, but she really just allowed me to become who I was supposed to become with her help. And so I wanted to do that for other people.
Love that. What about you, Nick?
Thank you for sharing that, Mark. I would say for me, what got me in it is, like I said, my background was in education. So I started there. I worked with young students, and I did that just because I wanted to help out. But what I noticed when I started going through helping students is I noticed we're focusing so much on education, but it was more that was going on in their lives. And I wanted to be that support for them. So I started to kind of get the interest of like, okay, your education good, you got that going on, but you got other things you need to go on. And I'm like, I can't support you in that because I wasn't exposed to like how to guide them through certain challenges or mental health challenges that they were having. So that made me kind of say, man, I want to go back to school. And so did a little research and things like that and ended up finding like, I think school counseling might be the work for me because one, I get to work on the education, but then two, I get to be in the school system where they don't see a lot of people who look like me to actually guide them through that. So I think just kind of talking to students, experience those things, and just knowing there was a need, it kind of shifted me to go to school for that. And I'm so thankful and blessed to have done that because I feel like I've really been able to make that impact I wanted to make.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. I know you've both spoken about your journey so far, and Mark, you kind of touched on this next question, but were there turning points that made you take your mental health more seriously?
Definitely. Where my life was going, I was just struggling, and I knew it wasn't supposed to be like that. Mm-hmm. And talking to friends, I had a really close friend that told me to, ask me had I dealt with depression. Mm-hmm. And at that time, I really didn't know what it was. It was just kind of like, oh, people get depressed, people are sad, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. But for me, when I really looked into it, I finally had a name for what was happening for me. Mm-hmm. And once you have a name and you understand kind of what it is, you know how to tackle it. Mm-hmm. And so that was part of it. But then my children also went through some things, and it was my middle son that I was looking for a therapist for. Mm-hmm. And I'd asked my therapist if she knew anybody. And she was like, well, I only know 2 African-American males, and I would really only recommend one. And so I'm just thinking like, wow, Atlanta's the blackest city I know, you know, and we don't have men in this space. That's surprising. So that kind of just pushed me like I can be part of the solution, not part of the problem.
Thank you for that.
I think for me, what made me start taking it seriously is one, in my own family, I have a lot of really my two close cousins. They're my big cousins, so I looked up to them. Once I kind of got a little older and shifted over to Atlanta, I started noticing that they were kind of going through their own things. Like I would check in with my family, like, hey, one of your cousins is dealing with this, another cousin's dealing with this, but my family didn't know how to address it. They didn't know how to help it, so they kind of got stranded. And so that made me start with this thing like, oh, dang, if anything ever happens to me, I need to make sure I have things in place for myself. And so moving out here, I ended up feeling a strong sense of isolation. I moved out here. It was me and my wife, and that was really it. Didn't have a community, didn't have anything. And I started to feel that feeling of depression and isolation, but I didn't really know what it was. I was just like, man, I don't even want to get up today. I'm up now, and I'm just like, I don't even know. I don't want to do nothing. I got to go to work, got to do this. I don't want to do anything. And so that made me really sit back and think. And I think I was talking to a friend, and he was just like, hey, man, you doing all right? Because every time I talk to you, you know, it seems like something's going on. It seems like you're not happy or anything like that. And so that, though, the instance with my family and then also going through that and not having nowhere to turn just made me kind of shift into say, hey, I need to really take this seriously before I look up and I may feel like I may be where my cousins are at and I actually seen where that can get you. And I'm just like, I can start making the right steps to taking my mental health seriously and just really buckling down and putting myself first.
I think it's very interesting that both of you kind of allude to the lack of resources and wanting to make a change. And like you said, you know, Atlanta being a predominantly black city, there's only 2 therapists you can recommend. Like, and I respect the fact that you took that step forward to then become a resource for those young black men out there. And I also think it's interesting that, you know, both of you spoke on the family aspect and how that makes you want to take things more seriously. And I feel like I can relate to that. I think that I think it's unfortunate that a lot of the times we have to see others around us before we take the steps ourselves. But it also kind of represents the sense of community that we have and how, you know, we're together and we can recognize things in each other. Like you said, your friend was like, are you okay? You know, I think that's very important to have that support system that helps you get through things. And I think that's why things like Silence the Shame are so important because it provides an outlet to silence the shame.
Yes, definitely.
I agree, and it's funny because we avoid the conversations, and I say this all the time, like black men seem to I'm good yourself to a really bad space. You know, oh man, I'm good, and knowing that you're not. But I like how you spoke about, you know, recognizing it in your cousins and then asking the question like, nah, are you really good? Or your boy, he knew that something was off and says, are you really good? Because those are questions that we have to ask and we have to make space for that answer. A lot of times we may be too busy to get the answer and to really sit in the answer of our boy. Like, hey man, you good? And then we'll just keep going with our lives. But if you ask, make room for the answer because they might be ready to share.
100%.
Yeah, Mark, I'm glad that you mentioned that good, I'm good, because I felt like I was stuck in that. Someone else like, I don't even think about it. Even like my wife asked her, you like, he's like, how you doing? Good, straight. And I don't even take the time to actually sit down and say, wait, am I actually good? And I've noticed I've been doing that. So I try to be a little bit more aware to say, you know what, I'm not good. Or let me sit in that for a little bit just so I can figure out how I'm really feeling. And that little second pause has been so helpful. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
And I think on the topic of saying I'm good, I'm not a black man clearly, but I have like, you know, I have cousins, I have uncles, I have brothers, I have friends, and being at the school that I go to at Morehouse right across the street, I have a lot of Morehouse brothers, and, you know, having conversations where I'm being told like, oh, I'm stressed, I'm overwhelmed, I'm going through stuff, and then you ask like, okay, well, do you want to talk about it? Do you want to deal with it? No, I'm fine, I'm straight, I'm gonna just get it done, get through it. And I feel like a lot of, especially young black men around our age, like youth especially, not really feeling safe or feeling like they have this space to be able to express themselves. And yes, like you may have friends or like brothers and be surrounded by that brotherhood, and like it brings that comfort in the moment, but it doesn't fulfill enough to really express what's going on, because a lot of people are embarrassed or have those like toxic masculine thoughts that may have been instilled in them from young, that it's not okay to be able to speak, and it's not okay to tell their feelings when that's not true at all. So I think that's a really good point that all of you made.
I just wanted to touch on something, and I'm so glad that you used that word, safe. That's such a big word for us, and most of the people that I've come across, they're not going to speak and they're not going to talk about it unless they feel safe. So I know one of the things that we're probably going to talk about is what can we do, and I just wanted to hit that while you mentioned it. Make sure that you're creating a safe space. Not, I mean, I know we joke around and we can play and we can say stuff, but making sure that when somebody is talking and they're talking about something serious, let them get it out, make sure that they're safe, never use it in a weaponizing kind of manner, just so that they can continue to feel safe. Because nobody's going to let go unless they feel safe.
Yeah.
I think that kind of where I wanted to take this next, we've kind of already been speaking about, the whole I'm good thing that we do. Why do you think that barrier exists? Like, why do you think that in the community there's a tendency to just kind of push things to the side? Why do you think that there's a wall that we have?
I think it's a defense mechanism. I think it's a bulletproof vest. You walk outside and things are not safe for Black men in general. Society's not safe. Sometimes our neighborhoods aren't safe. We have trust issues. And so the way to move is, okay, I got to feel like I'm comfortable. I got to feel like I'm safe. That's where the bulletproof vest analogy comes in. Like, you're going to leave the house and there are shots flying. Well, you're going to leave in the best way that you know how. And these shots come in the form of emotional terror, come in the form of trauma, all that stuff. And so what better way to do than to kind of stand up like a brick wall? Nothing's going to get through. Nothing's going to bother me. I'm good. I'm going to keep moving. I'm going to keep getting the bag. Whatever it is that you're saying to yourself, that's your defense mechanism.
No, I definitely agree. I would say for me and my perspective, I would say I feel like it started when I think back to grade school and I think about growing up, my mom, my uncle, everybody, first thing say happen, fall, hurt yourself, get up, brush out your thing. You good? You okay, I'm good. You go through something else. Oh, I'm really sad about this. Let's say, for example, like I'm really sad about something that happened. Same thing. My family would be like, you're good. You're gonna be okay. Like, you're not supposed to cry. So I think like I just grew up starting from grade school, even teachers saying that to you, like, you're good. You're okay. I went to all my teachers when I grew up were all Black women. And they would tell me the same thing. If I'm crying or I'm sad about this, like, you're good. You're not supposed to cry. So I remember I just absorbed that really early, just like, hey, I gotta be good. That's just the expectation of a Black man. That's what I just assumed. And so as I grew up, it just became normalized. And you see people around you, everybody around you like, oh, I'm good. Never seen my uncles cry. Never seen my dad cry. Never seen my stepdad cry. So I feel like it was subconsciously just put on you to say, hey, you're good. And if you don't say that, then you're not living up to being a man. That's just my own perspective on it, but that's what I wanted to give for
Great
that.
perspective.
And I think how you elaborated to it coming from a young age becomes subconscious. Like, nobody's really telling us that we have to suppress things, but we just have the tendency to feel that pressure. Like, there's a lack of comfort in being in accepting how we truly feel.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Definitely.
I know for me last year, I've been playing basketball since I was 5, and then I tore my ACL and hadn't been able to play pretty much since I got injured last year. And I know for me, it was a lot of, oh, I'm good. But in reality, like, I didn't really speak on how I felt because I just felt like it was my responsibility to keep living life how I always lived it instead of, being open and honest. And I think that changed my perspective a lot as far as mental health, because experiencing such a loss in basketball for myself made me really realize, like, if you don't take care of yourself properly and you just always tell people, oh, I'm good, it really catches up to you.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in because I think that a lot of people don't realize grief is not about death always. Grief is just about loss. And so something like there's a grieving process that has to happen. And a lot of times we won't recognize it. You'll grieve if one of your grandparents pass away, or God forbid one of your parents pass away, but you don't grieve if something that you've been doing all of your life gets snatched from you. And that's a process that I think we all need to recognize and go through and be okay with that.
And I'm glad that the topic of childhood came up, as well as in relation to grief, because I feel like when you're being told that you can't react in certain ways from childhood, you lose that sense of innocence in a sense, because you're kind of forced to be built up into a man, what's considered a man from a young age. So I feel like that kind of segues into the next point about how do you all feel that traditional toxic masculinity, like norms, have shaped and impacted Black men's mental health from young even up to now, and just in general.
question?
Yeah, it is a great question. And I think it's shut down the conversation. It is, and therefore everybody's doing this in isolation, trying to figure stuff out. And there's nothing wrong with being your own advocate, but there is a community out there. There are resources out there that we can go to. I just think that toxic masculinity has kind of overshadowed that and closed some doors, or in people's perception, closed some doors of, oh, I can't talk to him. I'm not going to therapy. I'm not crazy, like that kind of stuff. And that's not the case, but that has been so prevalent in our communities that I think it just gets stuck there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No, definitely, I agree. What I was gonna add to it is just like when you think about it, it's so engulfed in the culture of being a man and being a black man that you don't even notice that it's toxic until you see, let's say, for example, you see an athlete who ends up getting hurt, and instead of saying, I'm really hurt, help me up, and they say, no, I'm good, I'm gonna walk off the court, and then they injure themselves even more, but that's like normal. So I would say, like you said, it makes you closed off. It makes you not open to be vulnerable, because vulnerability and masculinity seems to not go together, but they actually, I think they do. Being vulnerable actually may make you seem more masculine because you're true in who you are. And also I think too, it isolates you, like you said. I mean, if you're not reaching out for help and you're not saying you need the help, then what does that do for you? You feel alone, you feel isolated. So then you never find the help that you need. So it's probably a lot of black men and a lot of men out there who aren't getting the help because they think they need to be this way of being this toxic, I want to say a masculine man, I guess I would say.
Yeah, I think that there's a tendency to kind of correlate vulnerability and weakness.
Yes.
And I don't know how exactly we got there, but it's a thing. It's a real thing, especially as like a black man. Like if you're too emotional, and things like that, just growing up as a kid, you know, kind of get looked at a certain way. So then when you grow up, you just want to hold everything in, and that vulnerability, which has a negative connotation, but I think it should have a positive one. Yeah. I think that we should, you know, as a community, kind of redefine what it means to be vulnerable from the standpoint of just being open and honest with our people about what we're really going through.
Yes,
for sure.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that. I think it starts with seeing somebody. So for example, if me in the age of 10, 12, if I see my uncle or someone doing it, it's like, oh, they're doing it. I look up to them, I'll do it. But if you never see it, you can really never do it. You can try your best to, but it's better to see someone that you look up to, a role model, a mentor doing it. It's like, I like that about that. I want to do the same thing. And I can see that it's actually helpful. So I think it really starts there, like being that example that you want to set for other people.
Which is very true. I think part of the issue though is the generations before us, they just did not.
Yes.
In a lot of situations, they probably felt they couldn't, but they didn't. And so those are the generational curses that kind of keep going, that have to be broken at some point. And so I'd love that the conversation is opening more now. And so young black men are figuring it out now, so that the 10-year-olds and the 5-year-olds now will see the 25-year-olds, and they'll see their uncles, and they'll see the vulnerability in a positive light. But I absolutely understand why it's not that way now. Just looking at some of, like I said, the older generations and how they had to come up.
Okay. You know, I alluded to earlier the two of you all being resources in the mental health field. So the next question that I have is kind of, what can institutions, workplaces, just places out in society, what can they do to be better resources and make black men feel more comfortable about being open with their mental health?
That's tough. And I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer, but I don't know if institutions and corporate America is going to take that responsibility. Okay. I think that has to come from our communities. I think that has to come from us as individuals and just our culture more so, because I don't see it coming from them. You know, they just have a different interest. And it's rare that you even find a business that has an interest in their employees. Most of their interest is in the bottom line. And even though they may be friendly to their employees, their interest is still in the bottom line. So I don't see that changing. But I do see, as a community, you know, us not accepting things. Things like taking a mental health day off being a norm, as opposed to, well, I got to lie and call in sick. I mean, the reality is you're not lying. Like if your mental health isn't right, you should call in. You know, you can affect somebody even worse than if you have a cold, if you go in there with that mentality. So I want to see things like that normalized, but I don't think corporate is going to do that. I think that's just something we have to do as a community.
Okay.
No, definitely. I'd say yes. Overall, I don't really see it. Just unless you have a change within, and you, like you said, you don't take it. You go in there and just say, "Hey, these are the things we need to do." When I think of like institutions, I'm gonna lean more to like colleges because I think there could be some change there as we have Science and Shame University. So I would say we can start in certain spaces and do so. And when I say resources and getting connected, it's really one going to take when I'm talking colleges when I'm talking about colleges specifically, I would say it's going to be one, the students having an interest in advocating for more resources and more, I would say, initiatives around mental health. I think, two, it's going to take the school to find the correct partnerships because not every partnership will do that. Some partnerships will be like, I'm just going to give you stuff and I'm not going to actually make sure that it fits the population, it fits the students, and it's something that they actually want to absorb. So I would say you really got to just figure out that connection and figure out what's the goals that each the institution and the resource have, and just start bridging it together. And I think once you start doing that, you will see a change. For example, I would say just at Morehouse, we built that partnership with Morehouse Science to Shame, and we brought in Science to Shame University. And they, after working with them for a little bit, they ended up letting us do a mental health summit on their campus. And that was a way of actually getting resources on their campus so they can figure out, oh, there's this person around the corner that I can talk to. There's a organization that's 3 miles away I can walk to. And I think that's how we can kind of get in there. But overall, corporate America, I think that's going to be a really strong feat. And I think, like you said, it's going to really just take us saying we need this and we want this.
I think it can definitely be pushed more on campuses, and I think especially on HBCU campuses to, bring in the topic, because I feel like we have a lot of campus events and there's a lot of things that go on and there's a lot of events hosted that people go to, but you don't see as many that deal with mental health and deal with student struggles and things that they're going through. And I feel like a lot of institutions can also make their resources more known and more open. I feel like a lot of, I can't speak for I'm saying a lot of, I can't speak for everyone, but from the school I go to, seeing and being across the street from Morehouse, having Clark right there, I know that like a lot of people that I talk to, nobody really knows where counseling offices are. Nobody, you know where the dining hall is, you know where the weight room is, you know where the gym is, you know where all of this stuff is, but nobody knows where to find the counselor. Nobody knows where they can find somebody to talk to, because those resources are not as promoted and as heavily promoted. And I think that's also an issue. Just if people at least knew where places were, that enough can increase who's going to get help, who's seeking help, and who's prioritizing their mental health. But when people don't even know that they have those types of resources on their campus, you can't really gauge those the people who need help to find it, because a lot of people aren't going out of their way to like figure out what's going on. So I think that's something else that can be improved.
So I have a question, just because I'm a little bit more removed from obviously campuses than you guys, but so I remember, first week of school or whatever, we go on campus and everybody has a booth and blah, blah, blah. You see the D9 organizations and you see kind of everybody else. Is there the counseling services and the therapy services on campuses they're not promoting during that week to at least let the incoming freshmen know, hey, we're here?
I would say that there's less of a sense of intentionality behind it. It's more so like the other things, the other organizations or programs or whatever the case may be are more intentional about being in the light. It seems like, as far as the counseling center and things like that, they're kind of like an afterthought, they're not the forefront of anything. And if there are events where, they do make themselves known, less interaction and kind of just in the back. So I think that, I think that kind of goes to society as a whole. Just there's a lack of intentionality about us promoting it up front. So then, therefore, unintentionally, we kind of just look at it as an afterthought. I think if we were more intentional about, having those type of things on college campuses and really promoting them, then it would help us lean on them more.
Yeah.
Interesting.
In the first week of school, they kind of like, introduce things that like this school has, but I feel like when there's so much going on in that first week of school, so everyone's getting so much information, it gets lost. And it's not in the same sense as like we have RSO fairs, which are student organizations and stuff like that. Like those are the big things. Those are where like everyone has their booth and tent, but those are clubs and organizations on campus. But I feel like if they also incorporated student resources in those types of events and in those types of spaces, more people would remember, more people have that information because they're not just told in that first week that we're here. They're seeing it more. They're hearing about it more. So, yeah, that's our experience with that.
Understood.
And I can honestly share just from doing this Science to Shame program twice, one of the projects we make them do is actually go to their counseling center. When we did that the first year, most of the students said, I didn't even know where my counseling center. I had to ask around to find it.
Wow.
And they had never even talked to anybody in there. So we have noticed that there is a lack of just interaction between the counseling center and the students. And that's what one of our goals of Science to Shame University is, to bridge that gap so that students understand it's there. And I'm not gonna lie, some of the counseling centers be having some really, really cool activities that they do at all the schools that we work with. But it's like they said, the intentionality of getting to the students and letting them know, hey, we're always here for you, I think is just something that just needs to be pushed a little bit more.
I think it's a balance of both the students and the people that work in the centers, because, of course, like I said, the lack of intentionality is there from the standpoint of they more so are like, okay, if you need us, we're here, instead of making ourselves seem presentable. But by the same token, it's on the students to know, like, we have this resource. Let's go use it. But like you said, a lot of people don't even know where their counseling center is. And that's a bad place to start. If you do need help, you don't even know where to go, that's a bad place to start. So I think that we need to be more intentional about having the information, but at the same time, they need to be more intentional about making themselves known that they're always here, not just when you really need them.
Yeah.
Good point.
And I think with us speaking about students not knowing where the places are, even when some students do know, they don't feel comfortable to go and they don't feel inclined to go. So what are some non-traditional or like community-based ways that you can suggest for Black men to find healing outside of like therapy, or ways that you know of that people have found healing outside of therapy if they don't feel comfortable going that route?
Obviously, I'm going to push therapy, but just even within your friend groups, like, you know, we find time to go out, we find time to go drinking, whatever it is, but finding time for real conversations, even if it's not with a therapist, if it's amongst your friends, somewhere you feel safe. And so if for example, I have a group of guys, and we call every last Thursday of the month Gentlemen's Club. And we literally go, we smoke cigars, and we actually talk for real. We're all fathers, we're all, you know, in the community, we're all businessmen, and we talk about those things. So yeah, there's a time to kind of talk and party and just be outside, but there's also a time when you got to talk about real stuff. And so if somebody's going through something, if somebody has a child that's going through something, we have those conversations. And so scale it back to whatever it is that works for you. You know, find a group of people that are willing to have these conversations, and not just every blue moon, but, you know, try to make them regular.
Intentionality.
Intentionality, and making them safe so that when people come in, they do feel like they can talk. Because it does take a minute to find a therapist. It may take a minute to build that rapport with the therapist. But if you got your friends right around, you know, you already feel safe to an extent, and so you have to start having those conversations. It'll make it easier for you to have the conversation when you do find a therapist.
I was going to say the same thing. I definitely push therapy, but I understand that may not be the first step for everybody. So one, I would say definitely build a community. That's your first resource. If it's if it's family, if it's friends, whatever, just someone you can lean on when you are going through something. Because when you don't have anybody to lean on, that's when it really can become fearful, because you're feeling isolated and you're alone. So I would say definitely that. Another thing is find, if you are just like, I don't really know what to do, find something that you're just passionate about. For example, you said you love basketball. When you're on that court, it's probably therapy for you. When I'm at home and I'm listening to music, I'm listening to a vinyl and I'm sitting down, nobody's giving me no problems, that's my therapy. And it makes me feel good. I can, like, whatever I had going on that day, I can leave it alone and I can do that. So I think it's like finding your own passion, finding your own thing that makes you happy, I would say healthy activities as well. And then I would say also ask around. Think sometimes we are comfortable to figure out, hey, what is someone else doing? So sometimes I'll even ask my friends, like, hey, what do you do to, you know, to maintain your mental health? What do you do to stay happy? And sometimes I found unique things I've never done before. Like I have a friend who he gets massages, But I never thought of it as like, I thought it was just like, I'm sore, let me get a massage. But he's like, no, I do that for like therapy. I get to sit down and just kind of relax. I know somebody else, like they have a club that they do. It's a running club. So you just got to find things that work for you and then ask around for unique resources, because not everybody is doing mental health and just like such a serious, like sometimes you think of mental health, it's like, it's very serious, but there's unique ways of doing it. Like I know a guy I've talked to where basically he calls himself like a creative group. So they get together and they talk about things that they're going on, but they do it in a creative way where they may have like, you're making music or you're journaling or you're making like collages and things. So there's unique things out there to kind of handle your mental health and kind of zen out, but you kind of got to ask around and be a little bit open.
Okay.
I love that you brought that up. And just to kind of tie it in for some people, the name that we use for that and the name that I hear floating around all the time is self-care. And so doing the self-care, I actually was in grad school with a girl who colored. And I didn't think about coloring since I was 5. But literally, that is what she does, and it brings down her anxiety. I mean, it really works for her. And so it can be anything. Yeah. Like you mentioned vinyl, I'm a music guy too. So I literally listen to music when I go to sleep. It plays all night. I listen to it when I'm in the shower, listen to it when I get in the car. So by the time I even have to deal with people, I got about 12 hours of music banked in me. And so I'm good. I know I can regulate my emotions. I know that I'm in a decent space. So yeah, whatever works for you. I always suggest there are different levels of tools. People do self-care on vacation. Well, that's a big level of tool, but you might need something within 5 minutes. Right. And so, you got breathing exercises. You can listen to a song or hum a song. You can draw, you can journal, just have a wide variety of tools that you can go to kind of whenever you need.
I think that, a word that you said that stuck with me is serious, about how mental health has this serious connotation behind it. But self-care doesn't necessarily have to be that serious, We try and act like mental health is some daunting thing that shouldn't really be spoken on. But each and every day, just take care of yourself,
So as we wrap up our conversation, I feel like a good point for our viewers, with people of all ages watching this, but especially college students, as we've been talking about mental health and therapy and all that, and as we brought up with our last question, how therapy is a recommended process. How do you feel that the narrative can be shifted, that going to therapy is not a sign of weakness, it's just a sign of getting better and doing better for yourself? And how can that narrative be shifted into something more positive so people are willing to come out and get help and seek therapy and stuff like that?
When I tell people about therapy, I often speak about it just kind of like going to the doctor once a year for your physical. I mean, therapy and mental health is just something that you need to just pay attention to. Like you said, it doesn't have to have this overwhelming connotation, but it is serious enough that it's something that we should pay attention to. We should get checkups on, even if we don't feel like anything is necessarily going on. Just check in. And so I speak of it in that way, that it kind of makes it more palatable for somebody to think about, okay, well, I went to the doctor this month, and so every quarter I'm gonna go to a therapist and just talk things through if something's going on, or maybe if not anything is going on. But I think it just kind of makes the conversation a lot more regular and more mainstream.
No, thank you for sharing that. Just to add, because I agree with everything you said, I would say one is mention it when you're going to it or you're thinking about going to it, because a lot of times people will go to therapy, but they won't tell anybody. I'm just going to it. And then you hear later on, oh yeah, I was going to therapy for 2 years. Like, you were? I didn't even know that. And I've had that happen a lot to me. So I say, one, let people know what you're doing. Let people know about your experience too, because sometimes they think it's something else that it's not. There's a myth behind it to where therapy is this way. And I know when you go to therapy and therapists, everybody does their therapy a little differently. So everybody has different experiences. So I would say definitely mention that. And then two, I think, social media has been really, really big. And I thought about something. We had a fireside chat with Trevor Jackson, and most people probably won't think that famous people are actually going to therapy, but he had a whole conversation about his therapy and how he went through it and how helpful it is. So I think having people we look up to mention it more, like for example, if there was like a, did you go to therapy challenge? And then everybody kind of comes on there, Black men we look up to and we know, and they actually say, yeah, I went to therapy starting at this age, and this is what it did for me. And then that would have Black men and just our community in general just be like, oh, they do it. Why am I not doing it? And I think that can start changing it. So just, we got to find more like unique ways to get the information out there and let people know, like, hey, everybody's doing it. You just don't know. You just may not know it. And also, it's been very beneficial for people. So that's what I would say.
I think that is big that you said, speak on it. I think we have a tendency to feel like that's supposed to be a secret almost. And when everybody thinks that way, it kind of creates a narrative that people aren't supposed to do it, you know, versus it's really just taking care of yourself. Like you said, it's like going to the doctor. So I think that if we can be more intentional about speaking out on it, then we'll see a positive shift in that way.
I agree 100%.
Definitely.
Yes. So.
Okay, so that was a lot on the, you know, effects that mental health has on the Black community. And I also want to just say that this isn't just a Black thing either. You know, mental health is real for everyone. All of the things that we said apply to all people of all shapes and sizes. You know, take care of yourself always. And, you know, as we start to wrap things up, I want to say thank you guys for being honest, transparent, and vulnerable and sharing different experiences that you guys have been a part of and just being a resource, like I said, and continuing to make positive change in the world.
Yes, thank you guys. And I also want to thank our partners and the funders for this podcast.
Can you guys please share this episode with your family, friends, and anybody in the community so that we can continue to have more resources out in the world that make positive change?
And you can continue to support Silence the Shame by liking, subscribing, and leaving those 5-star reviews on the podcast. And we are always accepting donations to continue the important work that we do. You can text to give by texting SILENCE to 707070.
We thank you guys for tuning in. Remember to take time, save a life, and last but most definitely not least, silence the shame.
3, 2, 1.
I think it's time that we start the conversation to silence the shame.
Silence the shame.
Silence the shame. Silence is the difference between treatment or pain, life or death.
Silence the shame.
Speak up now and silence.
Silence.
Silence the shame.